welcome back to our podcast, our last 30. Cesar, welcome back. A podcast about life, death, and everything in between. Today's unique, man. We are getting all kinds of calls. The situation is that the amount of members of our community that are reaching out, seeking advice, seeking consult, it's just tremendous, right? So, it's pretty impressive to see the community come together and reach out for again for just updates, what's going on, and that's what kind of motivated us to really flip the script on our traditional effort to do this podcast and highlight a member of the community that we just haven't, and that is my special guest, Cesar.
Oh man, gotcha.
So that's the idea of today's podcast. We're gonna interview Cesar. I had a couple of questions that I knew I could rely on, and I went ahead and reached out to some colleagues and some friends and said, "Hey man, I'm gonna be interviewing Cesar." And another thing unique about today, we're here in Cesar's house, right? So normally we're at my home and doing that, and today we're meeting here at Cesar's place, and his mom was able to take care of us earlier, and we're stuffed, and we may or may not have been drinking earlier. Nope, we wouldn't do that. I wouldn't do that anyways. Nothing but water in my drink, but
coffee and mine,
and coffee in yours. So I wanted to concentrate, really, Cesar, and so thank you for your time. I wanted to concentrate in talking to you specifically about something that I learned. I feel like I learn every day. I'm a Hispanic person. I've lived in this country my whole life, and all that good stuff, and I still have so much to learn. And I feel like other colleagues of mine also want to learn and about the dreamer experience. Absolutely. And that was a lot of their questions as well. So
especially after last week's episode, I think it took a different meaning and started getting a lot more questions on what it really means to be documented.
Yeah, it's unique, right? And we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk a little history, specifically Cesar's history and what that looks like. So thank you for following us today. Thank you for supporting us. As of recording, first time we recorded at your house.
Yeah.
So that's a record. That's unique. We are closing in on
700
subscribers. So thank you, every dang 700 of you that allow us onto your phone, into your homes, on your computers. We're super appreciative. It's humbling, dude.
It's crazy.
I can't believe it because, well, we our goal was to get 5 to 10 individuals, and you get a little greedy. You start like, I want more. And that's how it works, right? When people say like, "Hey, that guy's already made $1 million. Why does he keep working? He's made $100 million. What's his point? Why is he still doing it?" It's because he or she is never content with that moment right there. Like, because the opportunity is, what if I could do more? And the way we operate,
we always want more.
We want more because if we get more, we share more. Okay. Lest we forget, we're going to be hosting a conference March the 22nd. We're going to share the details in the comments section. There will be a QR code.
I'll have the flyer on the comments as well.
We're going to have a flyer for you guys. We can only allow a certain amount of people. We don't have any funders. We don't have a budget.
No.
It's Cesar, myself, and a phenomenal committee that has been so kind to lend us their time. And so we're doing fundraising, we're asking, and sometimes we are begging. And that's the objective behind our inaugural mini summit, March 22nd. If you're interested, and who's it for, Cesar? Who's the summit for?
So, like we talked a little bit about last time, our theme or title of the summit is Inspiring Change. So we're going to be targeting our students. We're going to be targeting some of the incoming sophomore, junior, senior specifically in high school and their families. We're going to be providing some resources for the parents as well, whenever it comes about college and what that life entails after being in high school. So keep an eye out for the details. Again, March 22nd, it'll be a half day little summit. We're working hard. We're working hard to put this together for you guys. It's our inaugural summit. And it honestly came out of this podcast after a conversation that we were having during the podcast. And we're like, you know what, let's just jump into it.
You know, we are talking earlier, like, what inspires us? Off camera, we were sitting here talking to his family, and they asked, like, how did you even come up with the concept? And our answer was, we were at a conference, and we heard a gentleman with your name, Tocayo, speak. We've heard our colleague, Roy Juarez, speak. And from those opportunities, we were inspired to do something as well, to tell our story, to share with others, to engage. And that's what this podcast is all about. Our last 30, we're still going to be interviewing guests about the complexity and finality of life and of death. Yep. But because of the current political situations, we've been asked to also speak from our position of privilege about the current circumstances, right? And Cesar, he's an advocate, he's an educator, he's a leader in our community, and that's why I thought, well, let's interview Cesar. So thank you guys that sent in those questions. Appreciate that. Thank you for your time. Let's get started.
Let's get to it.
All right, man. So I have my questions integrated with questions from others. Cesar, I've known you for a while. You came to the university as a freshman, as a student. Originally from Durango, Mexico. Sir. You share that often. You share that as part of your testimony and your backstory. You came here when you were 8 years old.
8 years old, yeah. Almost 20 years ago.
20 years ago. Can you take us back to that moment, and what do you remember about that trip? What do you remember about coming to the United States as 8 years old?
And honestly, I think a lot of people might say, it's like, oh, you might not remember much at 8 years old or being that young. But I think just we can tell English is my second language. The traumatic event that it was to transition out of my country, out of my comfort zone, out of where I knew who I was and where I belonged, into a new country. And honestly, it wasn't an easy journey that we took. It was actually a few day journey. That we started off in Durango, made a few stops along the way until we ended in Arlington, Texas, and then finally in Grapevine, Texas. I've been pretty much the rest of my 20 years here in the U.S. So, yeah, that journey was it's powerful and still holds a emotional place in my heart, even just thinking about it. It brings back memories, just bringing back memories of the journey, basically, that we had to endure during that time, and how all of that changed my life to where I'm at now. A lot of people would sit back. If I went deep into the story, we'd probably be here a couple hours. But if going back, we're telling the story, a lot of people might be like, oh, you were just a kid, you didn't deserve that, blah, blah, blah. But at the end of the day, I wouldn't have changed any of that journey, because I discovered a lot of things about myself. I discovered a lot of things about who I wanted to be, where I wanted to end up at, and gave me that power of resilience, of overcoming any obstacles. If we were able to make it through that journey 3-4 days without not knowing what's going to happen, encountering adversities along the way. I'll speak a little bit about this part of it. Second day coming in, it's a group of us. It's about 20 some of us that are in this group. We're about to make the journey from the U.S. side, or the Mexico side, into the U.S. side. So, being from Mexican descent, a lot of us were Mexican and stuff like that, very religious. So we sit down in a circle. You know what? We're just gonna do a prayer circle. It's the middle of the night. It's like 10, 11 at night. We'll leave around midnight or 1 in the morning to travel overnight. We're literally in the circle, all of us holding hands, just praying. Out of nowhere, I just start crying, just bawling, bawling. Like if I would have broken a bone, type of thing. Just sitting there, my mom, who was with me, she's like, "Hey, stop crying. We're praying." The lady that was leading the prayers at that moment, she's like, "No, let him." Something is manifesting in him at that moment, and honestly, I believe that prayer circle, that manifestation that I had, was able to get us across safely and without any issues or hesitations, because we were stopped in the middle of it. I mean, yeah, we were literally 3 feet away from the person that could have ended it all, and sent us back after this journey. But once we started talking to the person that was taking us, the driver, he's like, "No, no, nothing happened. Like he just came up, asked normal things." Because a little baby, we had a little baby with us in that room, started crying, literally in the middle of that checkpoint. Baby starts bawling, bro, just crying. His eyes up like babies do. Honestly,
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
normal.
right.
So we're like, all right, get ready, go through it.
The journey ends.
The journey ends,
Yeah,
exactly. This is it.
right?
We're going
Yeah.
back. We talked to the drivers. Like, no, I didn't hear nothing. Did not hear it.
Ain't
nothing.
no way.
I'm telling you, the officer came into literally 3 feet from us. They did not hear anything. They did not see anything. And all 20 of us, thankfully, were able to continue that journey. And like I said, ended up being successful. And here we are, almost 20 years after that experience.
Amazing. That at 8 years old, you are already being challenged with a situation, really, some would say about survival, right? Trying to make it to El North here, and that's actually perfect. The next person, without knowing, said, "Would you ever consider sharing your story in a book?" And as he thinks about that, I will tell you this. Yeah.
Yes. I mean, yes, it has taken a few years for me to finally come into that decision and that realization. I've spoken and I've said my story at a few different conferences, a few different places where I've been invited and privileged to be able to speak on it, and have given little tidbits here and there on what it was or what it entailed. But until recently, seeing everything that's going on and seeing how much our voices can help a community feel something else, have that resilience, have that power to continue moving forward, I think it's time. It's going to be a conversation, obviously, that I'm going to have with the family first, because it doesn't just involve me. This is not just my story. Whatever could come from this story, for me publishing this book, for me telling this story to a larger audience, is not just going to affect me, it's also going to affect my family. So it's a conversation that's going to be having to be had with them. But yes, I think that's the next step.
I think it's thoughtful. I think you're right, Cesar, that for many individuals who've immigrated to the United States, it's a family decision, a family effort, and the pain, as you described, the challenges and the story has to be permitted by the family. So I do respect that you are doing that. Cesar and I have been working a long time, and I personally, when that question came through, I knew I was going to add it because I can make it sound like, I didn't have that question, but really I've been asking this question for a while. It's like, it's important for us to share our stories so that others who have felt alone in that process now realize they're not alone.
We're privileged in that sense now, where we're able to have this platform. We're able to have the platform as educators, even our education that I've had we're privileged to be able to have gone through that and made it out of those situations to where now I think for me it's my duty per se to give back to the community and to voice that story and let people know like, hey, yeah, we're all the same. Like, I might have a different job, I might be in education, another person might be a lawyer, another person might be a doctor, but at the end of the day, how we started this journey was probably pretty similar. If we're being honest, specifically talking about people around my age, because at that point in time, that's how things were done to be able to come to the United States. Things have evolved since. Things have gotten a lot more difficult, a lot more dangerous as well, especially talking about kids and bringing them over. So I think a lot of people within that age range could relate to my story and be like, oh man, I see myself in that, or I can get some hope, even if they're struggling or whatever, that things can be better.
You know, you've talked about this. I've listened to you speak in public speaking. Um, uh, he works for an organization out of California, if I'm not mistaken, based out of California. If you want to know more about, it's an Impact Truth. Impact Truth is a phenomenal organization. If you are interested in finding a public speaker, or goodness, maybe you are a public speaker looking for a home, reach out to Cesar as a advocate for Impact Truth and also as a consultant for them. Cesar, you were thrown into a whole new culture, a whole new language, a whole new way of understanding. Can you expand a little bit on what those first couple of days, weeks were like in school and the US, and what was that like?
Man, it was rough. Things put it in simple terms, it was rough. I got here. It was I hadn't seen my dad in a year. I hadn't seen my mom because I hadn't seen her in a year until the point that we were coming. So the first couple of days were just getting to be with them again, getting to enjoy just their presence, being able to go out to eat, exploring, learning, seeing new things. I mean, obviously, Durango has grown so much since I left, but it was not compared to anything that Grapevine area where I lived or whenever I got here was back in the day, back 20 years ago. So just going through downtown Dallas, seeing those big buildings, going through things like that, like for me, I was in awe. Like I had never seen this before. I had never lived that area of Durango where I live. So yeah, the first couple of days were very just getting to see everything. But I think once I got started in school is when everything started to go downhill. Not knowing the language, even the first time that we got enrolled in school, they're like, "Well, you're supposed to go to third grade. You don't know a lick of English, so we don't have a Spanish third grade for you. You're gonna have to go to second grade again."
And you're taller than the teacher.
And I'm taller than the teachers at this point. I mean, um, so that was the first punch in the gut. Like, dang, I have to repeat second grade. I gotta be. I'm not just the only or the minority in the group. I'm not just the guy that just got here to the US. I'm not just the guy that doesn't speak English. Now I'm the older of them all. People, whenever they see that, they're like, "Oh, he's dumb, he's stupid because he had to repeat second grade." When they don't, obviously we're young, we're children, we don't understand everything that has to go through that. So yeah, that second grade was very difficult for me to go through. Try to make sure that I was on the right path. And it just honestly took a lot of conversations with my parents, conversations with my teachers, which thankfully I had amazing teachers that helped me learn the language a little bit faster, that were able to push me a little bit, but not too much to where I felt pressure. I think I had the push enough to be able to be successful, but yeah, it was very difficult to be able to adapt to this new culture and this new way of life. I was not used to going to school from 8 to 3. We would go to school 8, come out at like 1:30, and would be used to coming home to my parents, playing with my sister, playing with my brother, doing homework if I had it, whatever, going outside on the street and playing with the guys. Down here was coming home at 3:30. Parents would drop us off, maybe give us something to eat for dinner, and they would leave to work. So sometimes it was just being by ourselves, trying to make that time to be together and being intentional, or even going to bed late to wait for my dad or my mom to get home from work so we would be able to have dinner together at 9, 10, 11 at night after a long day of working 2 or 3 jobs at that point. So that mentality had to change and shift. So we were, yeah, it was very difficult.
And I would imagine like you weren't communicating a whole lot. You didn't speak English. Teachers likely didn't speak Spanish.
No.
You know, you come home, your parents aren't there, or it's very little interaction. So it's like that's a long day of not having that connection with someone.
Yeah, I think that's what took the biggest toll on me. Because I knew that I had my parents to go to. I knew I had my older brother who was 10 years older than me to go to. But internally, I didn't want to bring them any other problems or any other issues. I didn't want them dealing with my stuff that I was going through in school, because I knew they had 2 or 3 jobs. Wake up in the morning, got to go to work, got to deal with their own stuff. I mean, we all have problems. So I'm like, you know what? Let me keep it to myself. And yeah, it was a ticking time bomb that at 18, 19 years old, it took about 18, 19 years till I was 18, 19 years old till it exploded. Because that was always me. That's how I started my life here. And that's honestly how I continued it till I was up to 20, 21. Whenever I started seeing a therapist, that I finally was able to open up about everything that happened. And honestly, that first month and a half of seeing a therapist, it was like a ton of bricks was lifted from me. Like it was just, I felt lighter because I had been able to finally speak on so many things that happened, so many things that I kept from my family.
How old were you when you started connecting with the therapist?
21.
Wow.
21,
So from 8 to
22.
21, you held on to
everything. So
everything.
To everything, because
Yeah.
that's the thing. Like, I was a good kid in school. I was in the gifted and talented program. Not even, mind you, second grade, my second semester in second grade, I got placed into the gifted and talented program without knowing a lick of English, because they saw how fast I was reading in Spanish, how much I was writing. They saw exactly math, all of that, science. They like, all right, we'll put him in here. That'll push him to help to learn the language a little bit more. So I was smart. I was good. I was a good kid. But at home, how I was able to manage my feelings and not be able to say anything that was going on was acting up at home. I wasn't a bad kid per se. My mom would be like, "Hey, you gotta come in." I'm like, "No, I'm playing. I'm gonna play soccer because I want to." You know, like, or she's like, "Hey, we're about to have dinner. Don't go outside." Okay, bye. I'm leaving. Grab my bike and leave. Like that was my way to react to everything that was going on in school.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't gonna yell at my parents. I wasn't gonna be a bad kid. I wasn't gonna get in fights, or I wasn't gonna get in trouble at school. Because I knew that ultimately the reason why I was in this country was to get a better education and to continue moving forward. So yeah, at school it was perfect. At home was the issues, fighting with my little sister. You know, so that's where I would get in trouble. So yeah, I think until 21, I guess I knew it, that I was internalizing it, and that's how I was putting it. But until I saw a therapist at 21, I'm like, oh shit, that's why. Like, it wasn't that I was a bad kid or that I wanted not to listen to my parents. It was my
You're acting out,
coping mechanism.
Yeah, that's right.
That was my coping mechanism.
Yeah, man, I can imagine. I think if you're listening in today, you're probably connecting to a lot of what Cesar's saying. If you have a similar immigrant story, even if you don't, perhaps you're connecting because the trauma we experience as children is oftentimes not addressed until adulthood. If you're lucky.
If ever.
You're right. If ever. If you're lucky.
Yep.
Because more individuals that I know simply do not address that trauma, that childhood trauma. So yeah, very much a relevant topic for our listeners. The next question, Cesar, it's a good one. At what age were you when you realized you were not a U.S. citizen or undocumented person? And what impact has that had on you? Do you remember when you found out and what that kind of looked like to expand on the question?
I think I always. Well, no, I don't think I always. I mean, obviously, the way that I got here, I knew was not the legal way. Let's put it that way. Um, so I knew that that I was undocumented and that I was here without any legal permit. I did not know or understood the repercussions or what it entailed into probably middle school or early high school. Whenever I was starting to look at scholarships, where I wanted to go to college, when I wanted to start exploring at careers, I'm a psychology and criminal justice major. My goal was to be at the FBI. Wasn't until freshman year in college that I learned that to be in the FBI, you got to be a U.S. citizen. So that derailed that whole path that I wanted to take. I ended up taking psychology and criminal justice regardless. But yeah, I think probably 2011, 2010, 2011 was whenever I started to put a perspective on like, oh shoot, I'm not like the rest of my friends. I'm not like the rest of the soccer team. That we can go out and travel to wherever for a soccer tournament because they're, obviously they were all legal citizens or whatever. So there were a lot of things for middle school and high school that I started to miss because I can't go out to this trip, or I can't go do this, I can't do that. That's whenever it started to be in perspective.
That reminds me of a story um, that I was a part of years ago, and it hurt me to know this, and I don't know if I've shared this with you, but a student years ago was going to be attending an event, right? So he or she signed up to go to this school sponsored, university sponsored event, paid their money, and later on found out that they likely were not going to be able to attend. And we're meeting with the organizers of the event and the student, and the question came up like, why is it that this student is not going to be able to travel with the group to this location? I said, well, the location is going to pass, one of the checkpoints and go to a state park. And we can't guarantee that on the way back, the student is not going to be in a situation where they're going to have to answer questions that other students wouldn't have to ask. And I remember the student saying, but the flyer said all inclusive. And that hurt me because I knew all inclusive meant lodging, meals, and entrance to the park.
Yeah.
And this student, in his or her absolute beautiful innocence, thought all inclusive meant everybody would be included. And that story is one of the tougher ones that I had to hear and be a part of. And the group that was hosted was just phenomenal. They were so understanding. They couldn't change it. They can't change the law. But it was a learning experience.
Absolutely.
Cesar, so let's talk a little bit about the law, specifically DACA. So if you're listening, maybe you don't know what DACA is. Like, what are they saying? What is that word? I've never heard that word before, or I've heard it, but I'm not really sure exactly what it means. In 2012, DACA was introduced. You were in high school at the time. How did that effort, DACA, change things for you? One.
Mm-hmm.
And can you explain what is DACA in simple terms? Deferred action for childhood arrivals. We know it's an acronym for that, but what does it mean exactly to you?
So I guess we'll start with the second part of that question first. I think to explain DACA, or defer action for childhood arrivals, in a short sense, in very colloquial terms, and super easy to understand, it's just a permit that you get if you came into the United States at a certain age, till a certain age. I think you had to be at least 6 or 7 years old and not be older than 6, or not be older than 16 in 2012 to be able to qualify. It gives you a protection um, a Social Security, and a work permit. So it gives you protection that you're not going to get deported or that they're not going to be coming for you. But it's a 2 year permit. So every 2 years, probably every 20 months, probably, you have to renew it because it takes a while for it to get renewed. So probably every 20 months, you have to renew it.
Not an automatic process.
Oh, no, absolutely not. It's you have to resubmit an application, resubmit your payment, resubmit payments to your lawyers or your attorneys, whoever is taking care of that, every 20 months. And then if you're lucky, it'll get renewed and it'll get accepted, and it'll get extended for 2 more years. And if not, then it won't. It also implies with having that Social Security, it allows you to get a driver's license. That is also a limited term. And then you have big letters at the very top, limited term. So even when you have your driver's license, if you get pulled over, the cops are gonna know that something's not right or something's off, right? Because it says big letters, limited term. And I think that was one of the things that started to change my life at that moment. I think 2012, I was about 16, 17, so it was time for me to get a driver's license. All my friends were talking about driver's ed classes, their driver's permit. I can't get it. I can't do anything about it. So I was still a freshman. Parents were dropping me off at school whenever most of my friends were driving. So I think that's how it started to change. I got that. I was able to get my driver's license, and I was able to finally work legally at that age with that permit. Because obviously I worked. I think I started working at like 14 or something. Because I've never been able to stay steady at home. Like I need to be doing something. So if I wasn't in practice, I was working. So yeah, I was able to be able to work legally. And I think my perspective about college has started to come into the picture a little bit more. At first, there's a lot of myths and a lot of misconceptions that say that you have to have a social security number to be able to enroll in the college. That was our thoughts at that point. Whenever this came out, DACA came out, and I got it accepted, I'm like, now I have a social security number. Now I can be able to apply for college. So that everything started to start looking at it. Started looking at the federal aid, which at that point I didn't know I didn't qualify until my freshman year of college, actually. So yeah, I think that just changed my life because without it, I think I would have been stuck in that misconception of you need a social security number to be able to go to college. So I don't know if I would have gotten an education past high school. I knew I was going to finish high school regardless. Like, that wasn't a given. That was one of the reasons why we're here. So that was a given no matter what. But I wanted to be the first person in our family to go to college. So that's what started changing. Again, started doing some research. I was pretty good at soccer in high school. Always been pretty good at soccer. So I had a couple scholarships to go and play out of state, some here in Texas, um, and that's whenever I think the doors started to open up for me. After 2012, whenever I got that permit for the first time.
You know, the situation with the law and changes and memorandums, interpretation of the law and the
Executive
laws.
orders, all of that.
You need to be an attorney to really understand.
Oh yeah.
Right. So let me start off by saying that we're not attorneys. We're not giving legal advice. We're only just sharing one individual's perspective and what it was like for him to come to this country. It's unique in that it is your story. Unfortunately, it's not as unique as far as the millions of people who had to tell their own version, right?
Yeah.
Their own perspective and uniqueness of that immigrant story. I'm going to say this, it's hard. If you're looking for an easy answer, this is the wrong podcast.
Yeah.
This is the wrong individual. This is the wrong interviewer to find the easy answer. Like, what do we do? We can tell you what Cesar did at that time. You arrived in a year prior to 2012 that allowed you to be protected by that 2012 memorandum.
Mm-hmm.
if you arrived yesterday, you're en route today, there are no protections. That doesn't exist anymore. If you believe that you're going to enter the United States here early of 2025, that's not a reality. Um, and listen, it's complex, man. I wish I could tell you it's so easy. Blame one political party, but it's way more complicated. Number one, where are you getting your information? I like to diversify where I get my information from. I get it from here, there, a little bit from there, a little bit from here. And all it has informed me is that I don't have an opinion and I'm not smart enough to share what I think is the truth. I think that both parties, because we run off a two-party system here in the United States, have done things to benefit and create barriers for immigrants, intentionally and unintentionally. And that's all I'll say about that. I could get into politics and I can defend. Dude, you could flip a coin. I like to think I'm so well informed, and I could defend either party with speaking points that they have provided. Anybody can. But we live in a society where if you go one way, one group is going to hate you. You go another way, one group is going to hate you, or the word of du jour is cancel you. Well, we're not cancelable because we're not relevant enough.
No, not at all.
You can't cancel the irrelevant. Exactly. We're like a major individual. You can cancel us. You can't threaten us in jobs because we're not representing our positions.
We ain't making no money off of this.
And we're not making any money, and we're here on the weekend doing this yet again at my home. More often than not, a couple times off campus from my home, and today from Cesar's home. And so I wanted to stop and share that point with you. Cesar, I think it's appropriate to turn this into a two-part, right? So I have a couple more questions, but because the length of this and the complexity and the importance of sharing more, we're going to turn this into a two-part. So if you'll entertain that with us on the DACA, right? We understand it's complex. We understand for this individual, it helped him or was a barrier along this way because of his age, country of origin, all kinds of different characteristics and circumstances that may not be yours. If you came from Ukraine a year ago, it's very likely you are a U.S. citizen this afternoon. That's the reality of it. If you came from a Latin American country, for example, let's say you came from Venezuela in the last year, it is very likely you are not a U.S. citizen. I don't know. I don't know enough about it. I don't know your resources financially, access to an attorney. I don't know your unique circumstances. But I know that the situation is complicated, and we hope that, my hope is that you won't lose friendships and interrupt family relationships because of politics. I don't think that's a good choice. What do you think? Come on. All right, we're going to go to the next one because Cesar is over here ready to fight people and leave his family for politics. I'm not. I can, as they say, agree to disagree. He's choosing to remain silent. Okay. Cesar, you went to college. You got your degree.
Yes.
The absolute American dream. Okay. You built a career in higher education. You've worked at community colleges, private, public universities in the state of Texas, and outside the state of Texas as well, for some pretty impressive universities. Mindful that DACA is not a permanent solution, right, for anyone, not just you, but mindful of your accolades. How does it feel to have your life, if you will, on hold, waiting for that final opportunity to be a U.S. citizen, or to not fear what we fear in our community?
Honestly, I think it has changed and evolved with time. I think at the beginning, when I was in college and starting my career, I was very hesitant, very low key per se, on how I acted, where I acted, what I said, how I said it. No, probably nobody knew at my first two jobs that I was talking. They knew that I was bilingual and that I was from Mexican descent, but that's all they knew.
They can't make that assumption.
Exactly. Yeah. They didn't know nothing about it. I think it was probably midway through my career or through my position at the University of North Texas where I started to talk to more students. That's where I developed the Latino mentorship program at UNT and started seeing these guys pretty much in my office 24/7 and on my phone 24/7 because these dudes would call me in the middle of the night or text me for whatever they needed, and started to talk to them and get to know them, get to know them a little bit more in depth. And I saw that some of them were afraid, just like I was. They were DACA, they were undocumented, they had a permit, whatever the case was. But some, for some reason, they felt comfortable coming to me and telling me their story and telling me what they were going through. So I'm like, if I'm not open about it and haven't been open about it, and they feel like this to come and tell me their story or ask for advice or just to bounce back ideas on what they might do or what their future, because I think that's what it was a lot about. Like, dude, I want to go to this college or I want to do this or I want to do that, but can I or should I? Am I able to? Can I go to this trip? Can I not? So I just one day I literally did a mini keynote presentation to my kids. My kids. That's what I used to call them. They were my baby. They were like literally 2 years younger than me, 3 years younger than me. When they were my kids. One of our meetings, I'm like, "Hey, this is me. Like, we're doing a presentation on me today.
Completely vulnerable.
Vulnerable in front of them." And I started seeing tears in the crowd. These students that were crying, that had tears in their eyes, they're like, "Thank you. We know how you feel because we were there. We are there. Thank you for being one of us and being vulnerable enough to tell your story so us have somebody to look up to." So I think that's completely where it changed. So I was very hesitant on what I did. I started to be a little bit more bold whenever it came to the decisions that I made at work, advocating for my students, my career even. Ended up moving to Omaha for a little bit to try to move my career up after being here for a while. So started being a little bit more bold now. I think I'm at a point where, like,
me vale?
To be honest, me vale. Like, I don't like, I don't care anymore. I've said it.
Watch your mouth.
I don't give a fire.
We don't say that.
I said I don't give a fire.
Am I right? We don't.
We do.
Like
Yeah, we do. At this point, I've said it at conferences. I've said it in front of students.
The F word?
That too.
Your story.
My story.
The vulnerability.
In front of students, in front of staff, in front of faculty. I have presentations that are designed to speak about that. I have designed programs with that intentionality and that rationale. So at this point, I'm like, you know what? Just gotta flow. Whatever it comes, it's gonna come. If I'm gonna become whatever comes next in my career, whatever is next for me, it's just gonna happen. I think that's also another one of the bigger things that we talked about in a couple episodes ago. I've been more intentional on how about my day-to-day life whenever it comes to that my religion and how I do things. That I'm honestly I'm like, all right, take me wherever you need me to go, put me where you need me to be. If I gotta be in front of students talking about my story, if I gotta be in front of you guys now talking about my story, that's where I need to be. I'm not putting any issues. I'm not putting any complaints. I'm not complaining about it. I'm here to do the work. I'm here to do what I need to do and put that effort forward to be able to help. I think at the end of the day, like I mentioned earlier, my duty now is to give back and to uplift my community. I don't know where I'm going to be at in 2 years. My permit expires in a couple months. I'm gonna have to start that process here pretty soon. So like at this point, I've always been in a limbo that I don't know how not to be in it. So I can't think of what life is gonna look like if I'm not in this limbo. I can control 2 years at a time, and that's it.
It's brave for you to share that, Caesar. It's brave for you to make yourself vulnerable. It's risky, some would say. Um,
Yep.
I get why you do it, man. I worry also that I'm gonna go on to the next question because I don't want us to get in a situation where we're both out of a job. Right there, what do we do? We've seen DACA and you talked about this, and here's literally the next question. We've seen DACA in legal limbo for years. Court cases, political fights, no solution. I have watched the news for many years. I don't have a solution. This question is for Caesar. How do you feel about where things stand today?
Not good, but I think I've always been hopeful since 2012. I've always been hopeful that things are gonna change.
If you're a guy, you didn't catch it. The women caught it. They're like,
what did he say?
"Oh,
Yeah, so I think I've been hopeful, and I think that's the last thing that we gotta lose hope. I don't know. Again, we're in that limbo, and we're court, the case is in court. They're still fighting for it. One side agrees with it, the other side doesn't. Some people do, sometimes some people don't know about it, things like that. So I think we're in that limbo right now where we don't know where to go. We don't know what's going to happen. But I think the best thing to do is just have hope that something is going to change, that something is going to be resolved. And one of the bigger things also that I like to say that don't lose hope and continue to live your life if we were here permanently or we did have that permanent status. I think for a lot of us, we put our lives on pause because, oh, I only have a permit for 2 years. I can't go through the, I can't go and find my dream job, or I can't go into the career that I love. Because what's going to happen after those 2 years? You never know.
correct.
Get in it. Go for your goals. Achieve your dreams. Try to make anything and everything that you need happen, and everything else, I feel like it's just going to fall into place. Again, I never saw myself in higher education. Literally the job, my first job was because I didn't know what to do after I graduated. I was supposed to stay in my alma mater to work or whatever as a student assistant or whatever the case that was. Things didn't pan out how I envisioned them and how I thought and how I planned them.
Does it ever work? Does it ever?
No, that literally my 20th birthday, 21st or 20th birthday, I started my new role right after graduating, 4 hours away from home. When my path or what I had envisioned was completely different. We didn't like that school that I ended up at. But yeah, so I think honestly, just go for it. Go try to be hopeful. Remain cautious.
Sure.
Be respectful, and obey by the laws, and do anything and everything you can in your power to not be put in a situation of discomfort or insecurity or somewhere where you might be threatened for whatever reason. But continue to go after your goals, continue to go after your dreams, because at the end of the day, who knows? Maybe tomorrow they say, oh, DACA, get a permanent residency, get a citizenship, whatever the case may be. And then now you're 5, 10, 15 years behind from where you should have been because you put your life on pause for the what if or what might happen in 2 years when you were that permanent.
You can't live like your life like that anymore.
No.
You can't. You really can't. You know that. Cesar, thank you so much for making yourself vulnerable on this podcast. You guys have been a part of that for 10 months now.
Yeah.
Cesar and I have been here working on this podcast, trying to make it relevant, trying to bring you up-to-date connections, resources that we think are helping to facilitate change. We're excited about our inaugural conference.
Yep.
You'll hear more about Cesar's story there. You'll hear more about how education, finances, and mental health resources can help you be a better person, be a better family member, and be successful, however you define success. We're going to end this podcast, part 1, and then follow up with part 2 here shortly thereafter. I'm going to be honest. I smell your mom's cooking. I know what's happening next. I know we're going to eat, and then we'll be back.
And then
we're going to be a little fuller.
We might have a table closer to us that covers a little bit more, just in case.
Listen, thank you so much, guys, for listening in. Cesar, thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate you.
We'll be back here in a bit for part 2.